Everyone. Good evening. My name's Tom. I work for Arturia. I am the sales and marketing manager for the UK, but I am also a very nerdy product specialist as well. The reason I've gathered you all today, thank you very much for having me, by the way, Jason, and the Signal Sounds crew, much appreciated. The reason I've gathered you all here today is just to do a little bit of a workshop on sound design, talk about how you approach making certain sounds, if you have a sound in your head, how you can approach getting to that, a little bit of kind of theory around sound design as well. So I've got a scope here as well, just to explain some of the basics around kind of oscillators, show you what filters are doing, what envelopes are doing, explain what filters, oscillators and envelopes are as well, and also talk about the PolyBrute itself. So for those of you that aren't aware of Arturia, I'll give you a very, very quick company history. We were founded in 1999. We're a French company based in Grenoble, which is on the Swiss-Italian border. We've been going for almost 26 years now, and we started making software emulations of classic analog synthesizers. In fact, our first product was actually something Storm, there you go, just remembered the name, which was a bit like Rebirth, so it was like an 808, a 303 and a 909 in a rack, that kind of thing. And we took what we learned from that and started applying our skill sets to analog recreations. And what we learned making analog recreations, we applied to making hardware. And the first hardware synth we made was about 14 or 15 years ago now, which was the PolyBrute. And the PolyBrute was part of the very big kind of analog renaissance that was happening at the time. I mean, before the PolyBrute, the Mofo, that was my first synth up there, actually, that yellow thing. Before these kind of more affordable kind of analog synths came around, I think the only thing you could buy really was a Virus TI, a Moog Voyager, and like a Prophet 08, was it at the time? Something like that. Those were like the only kind of new kind of big flagship synths. And, fast forward now, we have, look at this room. I mean, I know it's full of Jason's personal tat, but there are so many different synths on the market with so many different user interfaces and different kind of ways of explaining things. But fundamentally, most synths are derived from a very similar architecture. There's a meme on the internet that most synths are just a mini-mode clone, and that is very true, generally speaking. So we now make a whole range of hardware, everything from something like the Mini Freak, which is a hybrid synthesizer that has digital oscillators and analog filters, right through to something as grandiose as the PolyBrute 12 that I have in front of me. So that's a little bit about the company. And then I suppose I should give you a very quick explanation of what we're going to look at today. So if I just go to... We are going to cover fundamentals of subtractive sound design. So how the building blocks come together, how they talk to one another, how they interact, the types of things that you can achieve with very, very simple things. One of the things I'm going to show you is how you can go from a very simple tone like this, turn up the volume, into something very cinematic and full really, really quickly, just with a couple of changes. We're going to talk about practical patch building, and what that means is building a sound with intent. So you want to make X type of bass. How do you approach that kind of that practical sound design? Not what I was doing a moment ago, where I'm just meandering through reverb and filters. But actually with a purpose. We can also meander through filters and reverb for ages if you like. I love doing that. We're going to talk about some universal sound design principles. So I mentioned that there's many, many, many synths in this room alone. I can see about 20 different types of synthesis just in this room. We can talk about some of the differences in the idiosyncrasies, but also talking about how they are all linked and how you can use a subtractive sound design within workflows, even with kind of additive sound design, that kind of thing. We're going to do a little bit of a Q&A and an interactive patch. So I'm going to take some cues from people in the room. You can shout out a sound and I'll try and make it. Please say something by Donna Summers or something like that, because I know how to make that sound very, very quickly. And then I'm just going to do kind of 10 to 15 minutes on the PolyBrute itself, just talking about taking my Arturia hat off for a moment, why I think this is absolutely wicked. This simply really, really good. Not only is it really good to teach on because everything's exploded out on the front panel, but it also does a lot of things that no other synths really can do. So if I just get back to my scope, just bear with me a second whilst I find my Mac again. So, what is a synthesizer? We're not going to go back that far, okay? But a synthesizer effectively is a modern synthesizer like this is a group of electrical components that have been put into a certain order to achieve sound creation capabilities. Generally speaking, a subtractive synthesizer will consist of an oscillator, a filter, some modulation, which can be things that move the sound around, because no one likes this sound. That's pretty boring, isn't it? But if I go... add some effects to it. It's quite nice. So you want modulation for movement and texture and that kind of stuff. And then output sections, they can also be controlled by envelopes as well. So you can make more kind of gestural or bowed or kind of more pad type sounds or that kind of thing. So let's just talk about very quickly what an oscillator does. I won't get into the kind of technical how an oscillator functions because we probably haven't got time to go through that. It's not particularly complex, but let's just talk about what they're doing. So an oscillator, generally speaking, I hope you can see it on the top down. It would help if I go to the top down. Have something called waveforms. Okay, so waveforms are the waves or the style of sounds that are going to be produced by the synthesizer, okay? And they can come in very many different formats. Generally speaking, on an analog synthesizer like this, you're going to get saw, square, triangle, sine, that kind of thing. And on the PolyBrute here, you can see we have something called a saw wave, which is this little nub in here. We have a triangle wave, which is the triangular one. And then we have, I'm trying to do this while I was looking at the camera, a square wave, okay? We are able to produce other waveforms within this, but I'll just show you very quickly on the scope what each of these look like. So if I go to the sawtooth very quickly, I'll take this down so it's not too offensive in your ears. It's called a sawtooth because it looks like a saw, quite simply. They are what they say they are. So that's a sawtooth. We go through to a triangle. Would you believe it? It looks like a triangle. And then we go to our square. It looks like a square. Okay? Pretty simple. Now, oscillators can be played with a keyboard, or in certain modular cases, they can be sequenced. I say certain modular cases, all modular cases, they can be sequenced. And they can also be freely tuned as well. So it just happens that this one is tuned to the keyboard, but I can move it around as I need to. So the oscillators are the fundamental building block of all sounds. And just with careful mixing and playing with the oscillator, you can achieve quite a lot of stuff. I'm going to give you a very quick example of the types of things that the PolyBrute can do, but it's worth saying that the things I'm demonstrating here you can achieve on other synthesizers as well. So if we go to our square, what we can do on the PolyBrute in particular is actually go from a saw to a triangle and in between, okay? And you'll notice, as I play up the keyboard, the spaces in between the notes are increasing, and that's the frequency increasing. The frequency, or how often those peaks are occurring, is increasing. That's why we call it frequency. It's the frequency of the peaks increasing. So the higher I go up the keyboard, the more frequent the peaks are and the more dense that waveform is. But on the PolyBrute, what you can do is go between the waves and you can add a square wave in as well. You can move that square. And what I'm doing here is something called pulse width modulation. Okay, so what pulse width modulation is, you see this looks like the pulse on a heart rate monitor. Okay, I can actually change the gap between there, and it'll actually zero out when there's no gap. So what you're hearing is the gaps between the oscillations, or between the frequencies. So I can come back, and as those gaps get wider, you get more bass content in the sound, or more lower content. Now, pulse width is a very popular sound for bass patches in particular. So what I'll do is I'll just show you what that looks like when it's being modulated. Don't worry, I am going to talk about this kind of denser LED section shortly. Let's go through the basics before we get into that, shall we? So I'm just going to show you what pulse width sounds like. And you can see on the scope that is now moving, and I'm using something called an LFO to do that. I'll explain LFOs in a sec. So just at the oscillator side itself, you're able to do quite a bit with the sound. So what I'm going to do now is introduce some of the other waveform. Let me just bring it up a little bit. And I'm going to start playing with the waves. So you can do something quite drastic before we've even got to any of the other stages of the synthesizer itself. So you can hear that kind of buzzy sound, that wee. Actually, that's a really good impression. Wow, I should do that for a living. What that is something called a wave folder. Okay, so what a wave folder is, that's a very unique thing. It's something that allows you to change the frequency without changing the pitch. It adds harmonic content. Okay, so we have our triangle wave. I'm going to now fold the wave. You can see that waveform has now got a lot busier and a lot more complex without changing the pitch. And that is an unusual feature of the PolyBrute in and of itself. Wave folding, we call it a metallizer, is generally found on additive synthesizers. So the concept of an additive synthesizer is you start off with something very basic and make it more complex. The idea of a subtractive synthesizer is you start with something complex and you dull it down. That is the fundamental difference between the two schools of thought. So we're going to focus very much on subtractive synthesis for this session, but it's worth saying that the PolyBrute is able to get those two different types of vocabulary as you're working through it. So we have oscillators. So these are I like to call them your clay. Okay, these are like the things that you start with, and everything else is sculpting. So if you want a very kind of harmonically rich sound, you can't really do that unless you get the oscillator section right. If you want a kind of simple sound with lots of movement, that's where your kind of modulation and your kind of movement comes in. So oscillators, pretty simple to understand. You can tune them. They have different waveforms, and this one in particular has some special capabilities. There's also different types of energy sources. So I'll refer to the oscillators as an energy source. It's something that's making sound. It's an energy source for the sound. We have something in this synth called noise. Oh, that's a lovely sound, isn't it? Let's just listen to that for ages. Okay, so noise, I'll show you that on the scope. It's just noise. What you're hearing there is white noise, and that is effectively all frequencies at once. If you were to play every single note on this keyboard, if it could do it, you would approximate something that's noise. Noise is a really fantastic tool for percussion. So if I wanted to make like a hi-hat, that's a kind of hi-hat-ish sound. That's how a lot of drum machines make their hi-hat sounds. They'll use like something called a T network. Oh, we won't get into T networks. I need a whiteboard and loads of pens for that, but also mixing with noise, generally speaking. But this synth has variable noise, so I'll just show you. So you can make the noise less dense or more dense. Again, this is before I've used anything else in the synth. I'm just using the oscillators and the noise. That's quite relaxing, actually. That's really relaxing. So yeah, again, you've got a lot of capabilities just with careful use of the oscillator sections. There are some other special abilities within the PolyBrute. There's something called Oscillator Sync. I will just show you what that sounds like very quickly. Take it down a tiny bit. So Oscillator Sync will give you one of those vowely kind of sounds. So and you can use that for your sound design applications as well. So and you can get quite a lot of kind of vowely, formanty stuff from Oscillator Sync as well. A lot of the kind of Prodigy lead tones I'm trying to think of the what is that song? Voodoo People, is it? No, can't remember. But a lot of those kind of Prodigy kind of rave stabs and leads are very much like kind of the hard sync sounds. So what's happening when you synchronize a waveform is effectively their peaks are locked, and it's going to let you move the harmonic content without changing the pitch. So that's why it's kind of timbrally similar to the wave folding a little bit, but yeah, it's a different effect. Again, this is just within the oscillator section that we've got all of these capabilities. You're then going to find a lot of synthesizers mixers. Something like, let's just talk about the Minimoog for a second. That had a particularly tasty mixer inside of it that was derived from the legacy modular systems. It was something called a CP3. That had a particularly tasty mixer that did something called asymmetrical clipping. I think there's quite a few Eurorack manufacturers that are now doing kind of CP3 type clones as well. The beauty of that is you were able to drive the filters and also get saturation. So we have similar capabilities in here. You'll be able to see it on the scope. You can see that the peaks get a little bit hotter as you get past quarter past. It's not particularly obvious. But yeah, on a lot of synths you'll have a mixer. And what that allows you to do, is mix things quite simply. Now what I've got set up on this sound is just two oscillators. And you can see them as I mix the second one in with this knob here. That is changing the sound quite considerably. Now you can actually mix oscillators by eye. When the waveform's going like slightly less crazy, it's slightly... That's a bad example. But you can actually mix by eye. You should really do this. It's going less crazy now, so it sounds more nice and in tune. So, mixers, quite simple. You have level for oscillator 1, level for oscillator 2. This is pretty standard across most synthesizers. I'm just having a quick look. Yep, they pretty much all do this. What the PolyBrute does in particular is you can actually say where the mixer goes, and you can feed the filters, which I'll explain in a second, differently and independently. So if you only want this oscillator going to
this top filter, you can send it there with this button. You can send it to the top filter, the bottom filter, or both. That is not particularly standard on a lot of synthesizers, a dual filter setup, but it is becoming more common. So I'm going to start to talk about filters for a second. And again, this is something that the PolyBrute does quite nicely. Just going to initialize the sound so we get back to a very simple sawtooth. We have two types of filter in the PolyBrute. We have a Steiner filter, which is a very kind of signature filter design for us. We've had that since the Mini Brute. It's a very kind of colourful sounding filter with quite a nice resonant characteristic. Going to let you hear them quickly before I explain them. And then the other filter we have here is a ladder filter. And that is a very, very classic design. Earlier I was talking about the Mini Moog. This is the very same filter that you'll find in a lot of Moog products. Now, this tends to be a bit more saturated, tends to have poorer bass compensation. I'm sure we've all heard a filter before. So what do they do? Well, you can see from the scope the effect they're having on the sound. If I put it on the right one, what they're doing is mellowing out the sound. So we've gone from something very buzzy and noisy and loud to something more mellow and pleasing. Now, a lot of filters have something called a resonance control, and what resonance lets you do is boost certain frequencies, or a chosen frequency, so that you can sweep it. So, again, it's doing the opposite of what we said about the additive synthesis thing. It's taking something very bright and buzzy, and it's carving it down. So, what it sounds like on a saw. Let's see what it sounds like on a triangle. You'll notice the triangle wave, it has way less of an effect, because to start off with, you can see the triangle wave's not particularly busy. The saw has a little bit more of a kind of edge to it, a little bit more harmonic content. But you may remember that the triangle has the metallizer circuit, which is that additive thing I mentioned, and now we can start to curve that back. So what they're doing is allowing you to sculpt the sound. But what if you want to move some of these controls, okay? And that's where modulation comes in. So we've got complex tonal capabilities at the oscillator section. We're able to mix them. We're able to sculpt the sound with filters, use them as tone controls. I think synthesizers in particular are a really good tool for actually learning how to produce. If you can understand how attack, decay, sustain, release works, you can probably figure out how a compressor works. If you can figure out how a filter works and how they're structured and how they sound, you can probably figure out how EQ works. I think they're fantastic learning tools for learning the fundamentals of audio production. But I digress. What if we want to animate our sound? So we've got all of this stuff at our disposal, but we don't want to stand here turning knobs. We want the machine to take control. So this is where we get to envelopes and LFOs, okay? So I won't explain the white sliders on the PolyBrute because they're advanced features. I think it's vitally important that we all just understand attack, decay, sustain, and release. Now, generally speaking, all envelope generators will feature these four words. Not all synthesizers have 3 envelopes, but 2 envelopes are very, very common. The term envelope, I have absolutely no idea where it came from, but I think it's because it opens and closes things potentially. That's going to be my interpretation of it anyway. So what do? Well, they change the behavior of a given control over time, okay? So I will just use this middle envelope here, which hopefully you can see says VCA ENV. VCA stands for Voltage Controlled Amplifier. And what that is the output section of the synthesizer. So what I've done here is I've just pushed all the sliders up, and that is going to result in a very slow sound. You can see it's taken a very long time to develop. Now, if I do the opposite and put them to something like that, let me just turn the metalizer up. Open that filter a little bit. You can see it's just on now. If I increase the attack, it takes a really long time for that sound to come in. So the attack is, the best way to describe it is slowly bowing a violin, like gently, slowly bowing a violin, or likened to maybe turning a volume knob up. It's effectively doing that. And what we're doing is controlling the behavior of how that thing is moving. So we can then apply that to many different things. I was talking about the filter earlier. Let me show you what it looks like when we send one of these envelopes to a filter. So I'm just going to make this longer again. I'm going to make the filter envelope longer again. Now the PolyBrute has this control, which is the filter envelope amount. I'm just going to turn that up, and I'm going to close the filter a little bit, and you should. Wow. You see? So it's animating the sound as if I was going. But I don't want to do that. I want to use an envelope. The beauty of using an envelope is it can do things that your hand can't. So if I wanted to do this kind of thing, 1 second. I can't move my hand that quick. And I certainly can't do it polyphonically. So I'll show you what that sounds like without the envelope. And then add the movement back in. And again, I'm doing very, very little with the sound. This is 2.5 knobs. So it's just an envelope, just a little bit of filter and an oscillator, nothing else, nothing else. But envelopes don't just get used for filters, believe it or not. Jason will disagree with me, that's all they're really good for. But they can be used to be sent to any kind of destination. So let's just use it to control pitch. Let's see what that sounds like. So on the PolyBrute, you have this thing called a modulation matrix. Don't worry, I will explain this. And all I'm going to do is send it to the pitch of an oscillator. So if I send my envelope to that, don't worry, we will explain this in a bit. You make a cow. Nice, eh? Always said. If you want to make kind of snary sort of sounds. I quite like that actually. Kind of micro popsy kind of sounds. So that's the equivalent of me going, meow, but I can't do that because I want to play the keyboard. So again, we're using the capabilities of the machine to make these things happen. So envelopes allow you to change things over time. And depending on how you have it dialed in, it will change whatever you have it applied to. So generally speaking, the VCA envelope is used for kind of bowing sounds or making something slower, or you can bring it right down and make it like nice and snappy, depending on the sound that you're going for. Then we're getting on to LFOs. So if I just initialize this again, an LFO stands for low frequency oscillator. So, it's quite nice visuals actually. What you're hearing here is I would say a high frequency oscillator. Okay, a low frequency oscillator is moving, but it's doing it at a much lower speed. Hence the term low frequency oscillator. Let's see how slow we can get this to go. There you go. So on the PolyBrute, we have 3 of them. Okay, and you can see their lights flashing. That's how fast they're moving. So you'll see, as I turn this down, they start to move slower. Take that out of a shot. There we go. So you can see that they're moving slower now. Okay, and we can use these again to move certain aspects of the synth engine backwards and forwards. So again, if we want to add movement to our sound, we don't have 3 fingers for each of the envelopes. We don't have 3 fingers available for each of the LFOs, plus all the other stuff it can do, because we're going to be busy playing. We want the machine to animate. So I'm going to use one of these LFOs, the low frequency oscillators, just to make a very probably terrible, obvious sound. So let me just send it to the Metalizer quickly. So just bear me a second. Send it to Metalizer, LFO 1, and then you can hear now that sound is animated. Instead of me turning that knob, it's now doing that on its own. So I'm not doing that, the machine is doing that. Now, you have different options for LFOs. You have different waveforms, just like you do on the oscillators, where we had our triangle, square, and pulse width. We have different waveforms for the low frequency oscillators as well. So I'm going to show you what they sound like. You can also see their effect on the sound as well. So next one. Just take that back a little bit. And then a saw. And then compare that to the previous one. Wow. And then we go through to and then we have these interesting waveforms called sample and hold. Won't get too much into how they're made, but effectively imagine that they're random. So I just give you a different sound. So now. So that's now randomly modulating this control. Again, I wouldn't be able to achieve that with my hands. I wouldn't be able to move at that kind of speed. And also not play chords at the same time. So, low frequency oscillators allow you to animate things
dynamically. So it's not like the envelopes that need to be turned on. You see with the envelopes, I have to press a key for them to turn on. The LFOs are always on. They are always running. So if I do, again, a longer sound, I don't have to press the keys for the LFOs to work. They just work. So that's how you get in your animation. Okay, but then we can start to think a little bit more interactively. What kind of things do we want to control? And again, generally speaking, on most synthesizers, you have, I'm on the right screen, you have preset destinations, okay? So on this particular synthesizer, let's pretend that we want to control the filter. We've already done this. On some synthesizers, you may need to dial that in on something called a modulation matrix. And what the modulation matrix lets you do is go, I want to send this to there. That's basically what it does. But on this particular synth, and a lot of other synthesizers, there are something called normalized controls, okay? And a normalized control is something that is on the front panel. It is pre-wired and allows you to get direct access to that control. So on the PolyBrute, we have the filter normalization, which is this part here. So now, I'm able to use this filter control. Each time it's striking, it's hitting the filter by that amount. And you can see what that's doing again on the scope. Specifically on the PolyBrute, you're quite spoiled with what you can control. So there may be some examples of things I'm going to modulate that might not be possible on other synthesizers. But we are at a point in the synth market now where many synthesizers have incredible capabilities. Something like our Mini Freak synthesizer has an incredible array of modulation capabilities and is kind of 12% of the price of one of these. But that's not to say that it sounds as good or anything like that. It is a fantastic sounding synthesizer, but it doesn't have the array of capabilities that this has. So there may be a couple of controls that I'll modulate or take control of throughout the night that might not be possible on other synths. But let's just give a quick recap of what we've done so far. So we spoke about the oscillators and how they're your energy source. So every sound requires an energy source. They have different waveforms, and they have this synth has particular special capabilities that allow you to craft those oscillations. Then you'll have a mixer, which will let you mix the signal in varying degrees. You then have your filters, which are your tone controls. There are lots of different types of filters. I should mention that there's 2 different types on this one. So this is a high-pass filter, and what that does is lets high-frequency content through and rejects the bass. And then you have a bandpass filter. So very many different ways to kind of shape the rich tones that you make at the oscillator section. And then we spoke about envelopes and how they need to be turned on with a key press, or in the modular domain with a gate. Usually they need an on message to trigger, and they will control something over time. And then LFOs, which are low frequency oscillators, which are just doing this type of thing. They are just moving a knob backwards and forwards. Again, you're not able to do that many things just with your hands, because you're going to be playing. You need the machine to take control as well. I'm going to give you a couple of sound examples of things we have inside the PolyBrute and explain how these types of sounds are made. So if I go for this one. So that type of sound is generally called a pad. And it's referred to that name because it's designed to pad out the sound of a mix. It's a kind of cliche 90s electronic music trick that if you run out of ideas, just fire up the string machine and find a pad of some description because it will make your mix sound better. Now, to make a pad sound, the general types of traits we're looking for is a very slow attack, so the sound takes a long time to come in, so this takes a particularly long time to build up. And then it takes, oh, I've made a change, haven't I? It takes a little while to decay. So to build that kind of sound, I'm going to take you from scratch. It's really, really simple. I do recommend if you're going to be trying out any of these tips and tricks that I've shown you today, do try to work from an initialized sound. So an initialized sound is like a default sound on most sims. So on the PolyBrute, it just so happens to be this really annoying sawtooth that I've been doing all night. And I can see everyone's getting a bit bored of it. I'm going to change it, don't worry. So I do recommend always starting from an initialized patch because it allows you to learn what you're meant to be doing. It allows you to, it's all well and good to go from someone else's preset, look at how they've made it, but I think the best course of action for learning how to be build your own sounds is start from scratch. So we're going to make a pad. We're going to make a kind of brassy pad, probably one of the easier sounds to make. So I mentioned that they're going to have a slow attack. So we're going to go to our VCA envelope. We're going to push the attack up. We're going to push the decay up. We're going to push the sustain and the release up. So that is now taking a long time to build up, and it's taking a long time to die off as well. Now we want to add some texture to this sound and a bit of movement. So what I'm going to do is bring in the second oscillator with this mixer, and I'm going to detune it slightly, okay? And you'll see on the scope what that does. Gives it a richness, almost like a, if anyone's familiar with chorus, you add some chorus to it, you can get PlayStation 1 startup music. Yeah, that's exactly what you can get. So, we've got the basis. We've got something that takes a long while to build up, and we've got a little bit of movement. So let's start adding a little bit of texture to it. Now, what you can do is use your VCA envelope. Oh, wrong button. VCA envelope. And I'm going to use that to control the noise. Okay, so I want to do this. I want to turn the noise up and down, but obviously I'm not going to use my hand. So I'm going to go to my modulations. I'm going to assign the modulation envelope actually to the mixer noise level, and I'm going to set it the same as the VCA envelope. Okay, so now when I start that sound, you should hear the noise come in. Here it's coming in at the end of the sound. So we've added a little bit of texture with the noise. So we've got a bit of movement, bit of texture with the noise, and we've got that nice long VCA or onset for the sound. But let's say that we want to move the tone control a little around a little bit. So we're going to move the filters. So let's just see how this sounds currently. Where are my oscillators going? They're going to ladder, so that's this one here. So I'm going to take the cutoff back, which is the frequency at which it's removing content from the sound, and I'm going to increase the resonance a little bit. And then I'm going to use the normalized control, which is this VCF envelope amount here. Just going to use a smidge of that. And again, I'm going to match the envelope to the ones beneath it. So they're not all going to be completely perfect, but you should hear the sound now get darker and then lighter. Noise coming in, you can hear the filter opening, and you can hear that sound coming in as well, the actual oscillators themselves. Now, I want to add a little bit more to this sound. I want to give it a little tad more movement. One of the things I would like to do, again, the world is your oyster on a synthesizer like this, but something that I think I might do is I would like to move this knob here, which goes between my saw and triangle waveforms, and I'll explain why I'm going to do that in a moment. So I'm going to assign that in my mod matrix. Again, we will explain this part of the synthesizer in a little while, and I'm going to use LFO1 to control that. So now we've got even more movement. The sound. Okay, so it's now moving nicely. But because I'm now moving this knob effectively like that, it means that I'm getting the triangle wave throughout the sound because it's doing this. So that means I can then use the metallizer control, that wave folder that I was talking to you about earlier, and add even more texture to the sound. So I'm going to use that as one of my modulation destinations, and let's see how that sounds. So So we've got something quite textural going on there. We've got movement happening on the oscillators. We've got movement happening with the noise, with the ladder filter, and with the VCA envelope. But now we want to do, let's have a little think. What else was a key component of that sound? It didn't have too much bass to it. So I mentioned that filters have different modes. So what I'm going to do is just move this filter into the high pass position, just a smidge, just to take some of the low end out. So that's too much low end. Let's just hear that again with the noise in. So we're getting there. And I think it'd be nice if we added just a little bit of sub, just to thicken up. show you what it sounded like when we started. That's the difference a few nocturnes can make if you know what you're doing. That's what it sounds like without the stuff that I've done with. So yeah, quite a stark difference. And that's only with a few careful dialing in, thinking. What I always say with anyone to anyone that's playing with synthesizers, not for the first time, because going at it with reckless abandon when you don't know what you're doing is the most fun that you can possibly imagine. But always go slowly. It's very, very easy to trip up and fall and completely ruin a sound. I mean, I could just do that and the sound's gone. It's very, very easy. So do take your time. There's a little kind of, this is super nerdy now, but there's a knob turning technique I like to use where you push your thumb over the knob. It means you can't turn it quite as quickly. That's a little technique that you can use just so you're not moving too quickly when you're making sounds. So pads, very, very easy sound to get right, especially on a big polysynth like this. They're really, really designed for big kind of cinematic polyphonic sounds. Any questions about anything before I move on to the next kind of sound example? Or any requests for any sort of sound examples? Or shall I just make some noise and we can all nod and agree? Cool, I'll make some noise and we all nod and agree. So again, I'm going to take you from, I'm going to turn that into triangle wave because that's even annoying me. So we want to make, let me think, we want to make a big stinky bass sound. So let me just find an example of a big stinky bass sound. That's a good example. A better bass sound than that one. That's a good one. That's a good one, but we can definitely do better than that. So, initialize the sound and let's talk about the characteristics of a bass sound. So, generally speaking, a bass sound is not going to take a long time to come in. It's going to be straight in. Sorry, that's not an initialized sound. That is. It's going to come straight in. So, we are going to move our amplifier envelope to this, what I like to call the top hat shape. And that is just going to be, as long as the key is pressed, it's going to make a noise. It's just like an on switch. Now you can change the behavior, as we've already discussed, but we're going to go with this on switch design for now. And we want to make quite a rich sounding bass. So we go for a halfway between a square and a triangle mix and take the pitch down a little bit. That's already pretty beefy, let's be honest. So we have got a saw mixed with a square. We're going to add a little bit of the metalizer or that wave folder into it, just to give it a little bit of bite. So we've got pretty rich sound. But what's the characteristic of most bass sounds? They have bass. So we are going to add in the sub-octave, okay? And most synthesizers have a sub-octave generator. All it does is gives you one octave below the notes you're playing. We're trying to make a bass sound, so let's go with as much low frequency content as we can. So I'm just going to start to shape that sound a little bit. And something that you can do on the PolyBrute is you can, so this is a 12 voice synthesizer. What that means is you're able to play 12 voices at the same time before you get any notes cutting off. So if I play 12 voices, 1, 2, 3, play 12 voices before the sound cuts off, but it has a unique feature that you can play all 12 voices at the same time. Which gives you an effect called unison, and I'll show you what that looks like on the scope. It looks massive. So I'll show you what it looks like with just one note. Let me just come down a little bit. That's what it looks like with one note. And then in unison. So we've now added all 12 voices on top of each other, added a sub, and what we're going to do is just, again, give it a little bit of detune, so it's giving the sound some movement. I'm just trying to find a sweet spot because we want that filter to, we want it to almost have like the transient of a kick drum. Just going to add some noise into it. One thing you can do with bass to make it if you're making a track in your DAW and you find that the bass isn't really coming through the mix particularly strongly, one thing you can actually do to make it stand out a lot more, and you can actually do this with a lot of different sounds, but particularly kick drums and bass sounds, it's really good for, is actually add some noise to it. And what it does is it lifts it in the mix. Another thing you can do is actually add saturation. So we have a feature on one of our filters called the brute factor, which is effectively a distortion circuit or a feedback circuit. So we're getting there. So again, that's what it sounded like. And we've taken that, and again, with a few careful things that we've dialed in, we've been able to make something that's got a lot of bass, kind of bass content. So yeah, that's what it would normally sound like. And then we've got something with a little bit more kind of timbral complexity. The next kind of traditional sound we're going to go for is like a lead. So I'll go back to this sound again, and then let's find an example of a good lead. This is where my keyboard playing skills let me down. What have we got? Not that one. Not that one. Not that one. Nope. Nope. Come on. Good one. Okay, so that's kind of like a kind of piano-y kind of vibe. So let's make something like that. So pianos tend to have quite an interesting sound to them. They're quite harmonically rich. Well, they're rich in overtones. We won't get into overtones and harmonics right now, but they tend to be quite a rich sound, and therefore they're kind of difficult to approximate with an analog synth. But what we can do is use triangle waves to kind of emulate something like a Rhodes kind of sound. So if we just turn our envelope up again a little bit, and we're just going to just get a kind of sound. We are going to not use any filtering, because I'll show you what happens when you filter a triangle wave. There's not enough harmonic content to do anything with. So all it really does is acts as a volume control. Not really making it darker, because triangles are quite inharmonic compared to a saw that's got a lot going on. A triangle hasn't got a lot going on, so when you filter it, nothing really happens. So no filters. So how are we going to sculpt this sound so it evolves more like a kind of keysy piano kind of thing? Well, there's a few different things you can do. We've already spoke about the VCA envelope. So what I'm going to do is put this shape here. So slightly slow attack, so it doesn't come on straight away and it doesn't disappear straight away. You can see from that status LED, it doesn't completely disappear. Okay. Well, what we do want to do is add a little tiny bit of harmonic content to it. So you notice when I move the metallizer control, the sound's getting a little bit richer. So I'm going to use the metallizer just a tiny smidge. I'm going to use LFO1 to do that. Not that much. So you can already see that that's got a little bit more of a kind of harpsichordy. And you can see that it's coming in and out as the sound develops. So that sound is already evolving. But we want to do something a little bit different with the tuning. Okay, so I am going to tune the second oscillator with LFO1, and I'm going to do it. Let's see how this sounds. This could sound absolutely disgusting, but let's see. It's all about experimenting. That is the fun thing about synthesis, just getting stuck in. Having the fundamental knowledge is handy if you've got a goal in mind, but also just going down the rabbit hole and just playing is just super, super fun. Sound is developing as it's being played. What if we would like the notes to not be completely perfect between one another? What if we would like them to slide like it was on a guitar or on a bass guitar or a violin? So you can go woo. Well, you can do that with the control wheels on this side. But there is another control on a lot of synthesizers, which is called glide. Now, glide does this. So if I go from there to there, it just goes boom, boom. But if I put the glide on, obviously that is a really extreme example, but used carefully, particularly good on basses as well, a little bit of glide, but yeah, just on keys patches like this. just to show you what it sounded like before. And then with, again, with the changes that we made. I'm just going to play with this sound for a second, and then I'm going to save it because I actually quite like it. And we're going to talk about adding more flavour to your sound. So we've made a quick bass, we've made a quick pad, and we've made a quick kind of keysy kind of sounding thing. I'm going to talk about effects and then kind of performance controls, and in particular what this synth is capable of. So let me just play with this for a second because I actually quite like it. This is yours, isn't it, Jason? It's not my one. It's all right. I can make that again. I can make it. No, that's fine. I'll make it again. It's fine. I know what I'm doing. I'll sample it. There you go. Thank you very much. It sounds like in the low register. Terrible. Yeah, it's a cool sound, that. I'm very proud of myself. Thank you very much. We want to talk about adding a little bit of a special sauce. So the PolyBrute has an incredible amount of capabilities. We've talked about pretty much everything that I've spoken about so far is possible on other synthesizers. But I said that I was going to talk about this great big stinky matrix here. And to talk about that, I need to rewind two PolyBrute products, or two Brute products. The very first synthesizer in this family I mentioned was the Mini Brute, and then we had the Mini Brute 2, the Micro Brute, and then we had something called the Matrix Brute. And it was called the Matrix Brute because it had this LED matrix on it. And it was a 2.5 3 oscillator stand-up analog paraphonic synthesizer with a massive LED cluster on it. With loads of extra inputs, so you could plug other things into it. It was a really incredibly capable synthesizer. And we did really, really well with it. We took that concept and we put it into the original PolyBrute, and then we put it into this one, the PolyBrute 12. And what this is, I would say, is an absolute stroke of genius. For anyone that's familiar with modular synthesizers, like the behemoth we have in the corner over there, what you do is you plug modules into one another. What a modular synthesizer doing is replicating, or what a synthesizer is doing is actually replicating the individual circuits that you might find in a modular synthesizer. So this has oscillators, a modular has oscillators. This has a mixer, that has mixers, and so on. What this LED section allows you to do is to change how these sections are connected, or change how they interact with one another. So any control on this front panel can be controlled by any of the modulation sources. So our modulation sources are our envelopes and our LFOs, but it is also the keyboard itself. It's these wheels here, and it's also this little pad here, which I'll talk about in a sec, and this hidden little touch strip here. So we have many different ways of interacting with the sound. So we can take any of these and send them to any of the knobs. And the way it works is really, 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 really simple. So you go into this mode here, which is your mods. So there's 4 different modes for this, but we're in the mods section. And you have some predefined options. You can't really see it on the top down, but there's 3 predefined modes. But if I want to control something that isn't defined, it's really, really simple. You hold one of the destination buttons and you turn a knob. And now that is assigned to there. And let's say I'm just going to turn a load of knobs at random and see what happens. I've done this a few times and it goes terribly wrong. Hopefully it doesn't this time. So I've just turned a bunch of knobs on the front panel, and now I can start sending things to those destinations. So we'll send this LFO here by that amount. So I'm sending 80% of the LFO to, what did I do? That control. And then I'm going to send LFO2 by 48% to that control, and then to that filter, and then LFO3 to that filter. I have no idea what this is going to sound like. Hey, it's not completely terrible. And you'll notice that I've added movement to controls, okay, or movement to various other knobs. Now you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different sources. So it's almost like having 12 hands or 12 sets of fingers. And then technically, you've got, oh, Jason, help me out with basic maths, 4 times 12.
48.
Thank you. It's too late in the day. I had a long train journey. Sorry. So you've got 48 destinations and 16 sources. So that is an awful lot of knobs that you can be moving around. You've also got the option to plug in foot controllers here as well. So if you want to use a foot controller to control something and not use the LFOs or anything like that, then you've got a vast amount of stuff that you can modulate and move around. And that's not the only way of adding kind of spice and flavor to your sounds. The PolyBrute 12 has a very, 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 very special keyboard that took us a really, really long time to get right. Poor Sebastian, hi mate, was working on this one for a really long time, and I'll show you what it does. So, this is called aftertouch. So, after I've touched the note, I can press it a bit more and it will change the sound. But this has a really unique feature. It's only affecting the note that I want it to affect. On most other synthesizers, as soon as you press down one note, it will affect all of them. So I'll do this. But on the PolyBrute 12, you can affect notes individually. And that is called polyphonic aftertouch. Now, the technology we've put in this is something called full touch. Has many other different capabilities, but it also means that you've got the ability to send that sound to other stuff. Okay, so I'm going to show you something very quickly that I think is one of the more quirkier uses of this. So I'm going to use the pressure of this key to sequence an oscillator. Okay, so a sequence is just, again, I'll show you very quickly. You record something in. That's a sequence. The machine is playing something back to me. But I can actually use the pressure of my finger to do that. So just bear with me a second and I'll set that up. So the aftertouch is here. So I want to send that to the pitch global. So I'm going to send the aftertouch by 12 semitones, which is a whole octave. We can all hear that. We know what that's doing. It's jumping an octave. But the PolyBrute has a really cool feature that you can actually control how the oscillators are tuned or how they respond. So at the minute, it's going, ooh, it's jumping a whole octave. But watch what happens when I put it into a different scale. So just bear me a second. I'm going to find one that's good. Minor. Okay. And then we are going to go to the voice pan. The pitch global, rather, sorry. And instead of doing a whole octave, we'll do 5 semitones. Why is it not? Okay, so that's what I did wrong. I set it up wrong tune mod 2 to minor, okay, and then, sorry, set it up wrong that time. I'm going to send that to this, so 5 semitones, so there we go. So I can now, with the pressure of the key, play a little scale. So it's not the best sound in the world, but once you start adding a bit of spice to it, individual sequences happening. When you start to play with that, you can get all kinds of weird and wonderful little things coming out of it. So yeah, just one really cool use of polyphonic aftertouch. We've already heard this sound, but this is a really classic use of polyphonic aftertouch. But I'm going to show you something else that the PolyBrute can do. Really unique feature. We were talking about moving knobs around and not having enough hands. What if I wanted to move every single knob on this front panel? Well, the PolyBrute can do it with this morph control. What that lets you do is have two distinct states at any one time. So we're going to build one of those from scratch, okay? So I'm going to make a quick pad, which we've already done today, so I won't talk you through it. Quick pad sound. So on that side, a bit of chorus, a bit of resonance, a bit of sub, a bit of noise. So that's sound one. Sound two is that. So let's make, I don't know, something with that kind of arpeggiated or sequenced aftertouch that I just demonstrated. So we're going to go to our modulations. We are going to send the aftertouch to Oscillator 1. Do that using this. So the aftertouch again is the amount of pressure that I'm applying. I'm then going to quantize or tune the oscillator so it respects a certain musical scale. So now we've got that again. I'm going to just make the envelope a little bit longer. I'm going to add VCO2, tune it right up. Effectively, I'm just wiggling a load of knobs at the moment. That's exactly what I wanted, is a horrible sound, because as you come back to our original pad sound, and then you can transition. Very extreme example. But what you're doing with this morph knob is you're not crossfading. It is morphing all of these knobs behind the scenes, which is an incredible technological feat. There's nothing that in the analog domain that does this. There's a couple of, I think like the Melbourne Instruments has a, oh no, but that's actually moving the knobs, isn't it? So it's a different concept. Yeah. So we can go from that very nice, well, nice-ish paddy sound through to something a bit more chaotic. So you have this morph knob which goes left and right. But you see, hopefully you can see on the screen, when I move it, it gives you the little square diagram. That is a graphical representation of this. So this little wooden pad here is just a 3D version of that knob. So personally before, where you have like a kind of pad or a lead on this side of the morph, and then on that side you have like a bass sound. So it's almost like doubling up the amount of preset capabilities you have whilst having to not navigate. And also it's quite nice for live if you are having to navigate from a pad to a lead sound. You can crossfade. It's really, really nice. You can do something else with it because the morph is a polyphonic aftertouch destination or a polyphonic destination. So let me find a sound that's got a good A and B. That's quite a good one. Okay. So we are going to use one of the LFOs to control the morph. Okay, so I'm going to send this LFO to the morph control. And I'm going to make it so what that's doing is for each key press, it's moving the knob or all of those parameters. So this morph knob is moving many different things behind the scenes, many different knobs simultaneously, and I'm able to send an LFO to that because it's a modulation destination. So, but you can also place that under polyphonic aftertouch. Now I'm going to do a very quick demonstration of that, and then I will invite people for questions. So let me just make a sound on sound B. So you can hear those two different sounds. Triangle, something else. And you get all the in-betweenies. Again, use your imagination for this a second, but I can use the aftertouch messages to control that. So if I send the aftertouch to the morph by 100%, so again, if I just make this slightly longer, so again, use your imagination. But you get the idea of what you can potentially achieve there. You can have two very complicated sound sets either side of this morph control, and just by pressing slightly harder, you can morph all of those parameters simultaneously. So it's a really capable synthesizer. There's many more things about it that I could go into. I could talk about this thing for hours, but I won't. It's worth saying as well that it does have a fully featured effects section. You've heard me using reverbs, chorus delays, all that kind of stuff that is inside the unit. A lot of the algorithms are actually derived from our software library of effects. It does have a very capable sequencer and arpeggiator. If you're not aware, Arturia make very good sequencers and as Keystep Mark II, in stock very soon. Yeah, so it's a very, very capable synth. I do invite everyone to come up and have a play. Please do ask me questions. There's so much to be learned when it comes to sound design. I've just gone over some of the very, very basics and spoken about how you can implement stuff that you've learned and apply it to other things as well. But yeah, if you've got any questions, please ask. If you've got any sound requests, please ask me to make a Gabba kick drum, please. Then I will teach you how to make that kind of thing. It would be my genuine pleasure. Thank you very much.
Feel me.
Yeah.